Welcome to the 65th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's audio podcast on family farming, sustainable agriculture, local food systems, and local democracy. I'm Abby Leash, Membership Assistant at the Land Stewardship Project. Over the past dozen years, the Land Stewardship Project's Farm Beginnings program has helped launch hundreds of farming careers through practical, hands-on training in business planning, innovative marketing, and goal setting. One key element of the Farm Beginnings course is exposing participants to the idea that producing food for a living does not require taking on huge amounts of debt. Farm Beginnings graduate Nolan Lenzen, along with his wife Vanessa, are prime examples of how making a go of it on the land can be done with minimal resources. The Lenzens, who are in their late 20s, have a grass-based dairy operation in central Minnesota and have recently built their own low-cost, labor-saving milking parlor. Their 40-cow milking herd is in transition to becoming certified organic, and there is an added twist to this operation. The cows are milked on a seasonal basis. In other words, the Lenzen farm literally does not produce milk from February to April each year. This is in sharp contrast to the typical dairy farm, which schedules breeding in such a way that the herd is producing milk for sale 12 months out of the year. Although a farm that is based on grass and seasonality may not produce record-breaking amounts of milk, the Lenzens say it is providing a good standard of living for them. Because they don't spend as much on feed, cropping equipment, and other inputs, they have much lower costs of production, which equals more profitability. Just as importantly, this low-input dairy provides a good quality of life for the couple and their 4 young children. They say it makes it possible for them to spend more time together and participate in community activities. This is important to the Lenzens because they've already taken a ride on the high-input, high-speed treadmill of conventional dairying, and for them it was a path to early burnout, financially and personally. Nolan says early in his farming career he used high-energy grains to maximize milk yields in a confinement system and even won awards for production. They pushed the herd and pushed themselves, all the while going further into debt and leaving little room for life outside the milking parlor and crop fields. The Lenzens recently hosted a Farm Beginnings field day that featured their low-cost milking parlor and rotationally grazed pastures. After the tour, Nolan and Vanessa talked to LSP's Brian DeVore about their seasonal grass-based system and why it has been good for their bottom line as well as their quality of life.
Yeah, so Nolan, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, you had mentioned earlier that when you first thought about getting into doing your own dairy operation, that the seasonal aspect of it really appealed to you. And I was wondering if, first of all, for people who maybe aren't familiar with that, how it's different from the traditional dairy system, maybe briefly give an outline of how your seasonal system works, and then maybe talk a little bit about why you chose that, what some of the advantages you see to a system like that.
It works on, I start calving April 20th. And this year I'll have 40 cows calve in 6 weeks. And grass up here, I'm not quite sure when it'll be ready, but I'm hoping by about the beginning of May. And after that, they're out on pasture all summer long. And October 1st, I usually start milking once a day. And that ties in real nicely with being seasonal. All the cows are late in lactation, so I can get by with it without too much stress on the cow. And the cows go dry. I try to milk them until about the beginning of February. Then they're dry for almost 3 months. I chose it because I wanted a life outside of milking cows 24 hours, 7 days a week, and it just 365 days a year. It gets old after a while. I did that for a few years, and it's just not worth it to me, I guess.
Yeah, and kind of the more traditional system would be you're breeding cows throughout the year. You're trying to set it up so that you're always going to have cows producing milk throughout the whole year. So you're getting that production all through the year, more of that type of system.
Yeah. The other nice thing is with seasonal, then I got this year I'll have 20 to 25 young calves, and I only have to feed them for a couple months out of the year. And I get to do it when the weather is probably perfect for raising calves, which is spring. You look at deer and, they don't calve in the middle of January. It sure makes it nice for that.
Is it a little bit of a challenge to try to get it to kind of get into that seasonal system and try to get your breeding timed and all of that?
I've talked to a lot of people, and it seems that everybody that's maybe tried it or is thinking about trying it, it seems like a real hurdle for them. But for me, it just kind of fell into place. I milked year round up until I decided to go seasonal, and then I delayed breeding on maybe a dozen cows or so. I bought some heifers from my dad that kind of fit into my calving window, and then at the time I could sell 2 Holsteins and buy 3 crossbreds. I did that on a number of cows, and I went seasonal in one season. And I think if a guy's going to go seasonal, that's kind of what you need to do, is just bite the bullet and go seasonal all at once. Because if you try and stretch it out over a few years, you're going to get burned out, and you're going to it just doesn't work right if you've got 10 cows milking in January and you're just trying to get to the point where you're seasonal. It makes things a lot easier, and you'll enjoy it a lot more if you just switch over to being seasonal all at once.
One thing you were mentioning earlier was, say, in October, when you go to the once-a-day milking, you may be getting a lot less production, but because your inputs are so much lower, and then also you feel like the quality of the milk is higher, in the end your paycheck's about the same, or your milk check's about the same.
Yeah, I've had milk checks where I've gotten over $6 premium just on components. You add that on top of your milk price, and when I start milking once a day, my volume goes down, but my milk checks will stay the same for a period of time. It probably comes out that I make a little more money because being that I'm only milking them once a day, I don't have the electric bill for the second milking. I don't have the chemical costs for cleaning the pipeline a second time. Quality of life it's second to none. I'll get done milking and I'll get done with chores at about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I've got the rest of the day, that I can go do whatever with the family, and I don't have to worry about getting a hired hand out here or being back for milking. They're done for the day, and so am I.
Is it tough to budget, though? You're not going to get that paycheck for 3 months, that milk check for 3 months. Is it kind of hard to budget that in?
I'd say for some it could be. That's another hang up that a lot of people have over seasonal milking. But I think that if you have a tight enough wallet, you can make a go of it. I know I sure do. I make sure all my expenses are, either prepaid or paid in advance. Everything's caught up. I'll have my hay and all set up and have enough for the winter, so I don't have to buy any hay. And as far as other expenses, there's really not a whole lot of expenses for the wintertime. Family living expenses, but you learn real quick that you have to start setting money aside right away when you start getting your milk checks. I think it makes you a better manager of your money, because you're not always saying, well, I'm going to get a milk check next month and that'll cover it. And before you know it, you've got stuff bought that's 3 milk checks out, and before you know it, you're further behind than you think. And
I was wondering if you could just give me back up a little bit, give me a little background on your history. It sounds like you came from a farming background.
Yeah, me, my dad, and my grandpa, we milked 90 cows in a 50-cow barn. We were completely conventional. We ran about 300 acres of crop ground. Nothing was pastured. We raised all of our heifers and steers, and that got to be quite a bit for 3 people. At the time, I was at our peak. We were about at the peak of 90 cows. I was 20 years old. My dad was 50, and my grandpa was 70. 3 generations and way more work than we knew what to do with. I basically got burned out, and I said, I'm going to rent a barn on my own, and I'm going to do things my way. I guess they weren't really my way because I ended up just doing it more conventional. I milked in a tie stall and fed TMR, and I chased production. I was up to almost 24,000 pound rolling herd average. Won awards for milk production, and at the end of the day, an award hanging on the wall doesn't put food on the table. Once I moved back to my dad's farm after he quit milking, I fenced off his whole 55 acres that was grazable. That spring, I quit feeding TMR, put the cows out on pasture, and by that fall I was seasonal. So I went from being a totally confinement dairy, conventional, to 100. Well, at that time I was still feeding grain that first year. I went from calving year-round to seasonal, and the next year I went to 100% no grain. That I don't feed the young stock any grain. The baby calves don't get grain.
That must have been quite a switch. And you had mentioned before that you had actually even gone to college to study dairy management, kind of the conventional system, right?
Yeah, I went to dairy management down in Ridgewater, Hutchinson, Minnesota, and before I had went there, when I was still in high school, I'd always imagined, going grazing because I had read articles on it and it sounded so much easier. And once I went to college, I got brainwashed into thinking that I wanted a big freestall dairy and big equipment, and that's kind of where I stayed until I got burned out for the second time milking on my own, and finally went to grazing, which is what I'd always wanted to do.
And then you took Farm Beginnings in 2001. Did you feel like you got much out of the class itself?
Yeah, I like going to the class. I don't think I would have started on my own if I hadn't gone to the class. I probably would have tried sticking it out and making something work with my dad. It kind of gave me a push to go off on my own. And
yeah, do you now that you've kind of gotten started and you've got a few years under your belt, and I guess this is your second year on this farm here, right? What do you have you realigned your goals a little bit? I think you're at 40 cows now. Is that kind of the size you want to be at, or have you thought about down the road 5 years where you want to be?
I guess where I'm at right now, I think in an average year, we're on a little lighter soil here, but on an average year, I should be able to feed my 40 cows and all my young stock with all homegrown feed on this. I got 140 acres. It's all in pasture, so I don't row crop anything. I guess I've thought about possibly going to like 60 cows and then buying in my hay. And then if I did that, I guess it all depends on economics and stuff, but if I went to 60 cows, I'd probably switch to once-a-day milking year-round.
Do you feel financially, is this working out for you, the system you're in now?
Yeah, since I switched from confinement conventional to, I'll be organic here in the following year, grazing, I've made more money this way than I ever have with conventional. So even with my close to 24,000 pound Holsteins, I was to the point where I couldn't even afford to fix my truck. Yeah. It broke, and I drove one of my dad's vehicles for a couple months because I didn't have the money to fix my truck. And once I switched to grazing, I paid off all my loans and took it from there.
Vanessa, could I ask you a few questions? I was just wondering if you could talk about how the quality of life issue with the grazing system and the seasonal. I mean, do you feel like that's working out for you guys in the family? Because that is a huge issue with dairy farmers, is the amount of time it takes, especially with the twice-a-day milking and all that.
When we first started out conventionally, I was working full-time, and then at the end of the day I'd go home and help him with chores, and plus I was going to college, so we had no family time. It was all work and farm. And things started slowing down, but once he switched to grazing, I see him all day. I mean, he's around all the time. If I need his help, he's around to help me. And if we want to spend family time or go do something with the kids together, then we can do that. And we've been a lot happier just as a family and a lot closer.
Yeah. Well, the most important question I have is I want to know how good those cookies were. Could you tell me how good the cookies were?
Good.
Were they good? What flavor?
Chocolate.
In recent years, Farm Beginnings has expanded beyond Minnesota, and courses are now being offered in several states. To learn more, see www.farmbeginnings.org or call 507-523-3366. That's www.farmbeginnings.org or 507-523-3366. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org or call 612-722-6377. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.